Alright guys, so today what I'd like to do is introduce you a little bit more to the idea of the quadratics. Now we're going to be looking at this through the idea of the quadratic formula, but we're going to be looking at some other ideas as well. Some things that maybe you've already noticed, but that we're going to kind of put together. Alright, now the first thing that I'm going to have you do is copy down these graphs. If you're doing this on your tablet, you can just kind of you can do a screenshot and copy these over to your OneNote, or you can copy them down in your notebook, all right? So please do that right now. All right, so hopefully at this point you've had them all copied down. If not, pause it and then restart it in just a minute. What I want you to do next is to identify the x-intercepts. And so we're going to first plot the x-intercepts on our graph, so just put a point there, and then label the x-intercepts down below. Now, you could obviously do this by using the quadratic formula. However, since we have the graph, that's not necessary. So I'm going to pause it right now, and I'm going to put the answers down. I would like for you to pause it as well so that you can try to put the answers down before I do. All right, ready? Pause. So there's the first one, just so that you know what I'm expecting you to do. Put dots on the x-intercepts and then label them down below. Okay, so there's the 0, 0, there's the 4, 0. Now pause again and finish. Alright, so hopefully you have this. We've labeled each of the x-intercepts. We've labeled that this one doesn't have any. Alright, next I would like for you to go in and label the vertex. So same thing, we'll go ahead and put a point where the vertex is, and then we'll label down here 2, -4. Alright, to show where the vertex is. And I'm going to put it right down below in between those two. Alright, so go ahead and do that. I'm going to pause it again and finish it up. Alright, so hopefully you got these answers. Note that the vertex again is the maximum or minimum. Even if it doesn't have x-intercepts, obviously it still has a vertex. Okay, now what I want us to look for is some patterns. Okay, now one of the things that we're going to do is, noting that that is at the bottom, let's draw a vertical line that goes straight up and down through your vertex. I'm going to do this for all of them. Okay, now this in a way is kind of like the asymptote, just in the sense that this line that I'm drawing is actually not part of the graph. Okay, it's helpful for identifying pieces of the graph and for recognizing what's happening in the graph and even for drawing the graph, but it's not actually, the values on this line aren't really that important other than the fact that there is something significant about this line. What do you notice about the graph on either side of this line? Well, hopefully you recognize that it's an exact mirror image, right? If you look at these x-intercepts, this x-intercept is 2 spaces to the right of the vertex. That intercept is 2 spaces to the left of the vertex. This one is 1 to the right, 1 to the left. 2 to the right, 2 to the left. Now this one, even though we don't have the x-intercepts, we can choose any point on that line, right? And say even this one right here, which is about 1.5 spaces to the right, that one is about 1.5 spaces to the left. And so we recognize that all points on the graph are equidistant, or the same distance from the axis of symmetry. So you can go to the right or to the left and you get the same amount of spaces. All right, so I hope that that's something that's kind of interesting. Most of you have probably noticed that already. Now again, this line that we've drawn is called the axis of symmetry. Now please note that we drew that line straight through the vertex. That means that the axis of symmetry will always pass through the vertex. The axis of symmetry, since it is that symmetry, will also be right in the middle of your 2 x-intercepts. Notice that if I take the 2 x-intercepts, 4 and 0, and I add them together and divide by 2, the average or the middle of those two, I get 2. If I take -1 and 1 and I add those together, -1 plus 1 is 0, divided by 2 is 0. If I add together -1 and 3, I get 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the middle of my 2 x-intercepts will always give me that center value. So here's one way to get the axis of symmetry. You take x-intercept 1 plus x-intercept 2, and then divide by 2. And that will give you the x value of the vertex. Okay, and most of the time I'm not going to put x vert, so I may as well not put it now. I'm just going to put xv. Okay, now there's another way to get that vertex. Let's go ahead and write out the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, you may remember from our discussions in class that this right here is the discriminant. The discriminant determines how many x-intercepts there are. We haven't talked about the negative b over 2a yet, but we have talked about the discriminant. We talked about the fact that if this is 0, that means that I'll only get one x-intercept because it'll be right when I add or subtract 0, it'll give me exactly the same thing. Now, some of you observe that when there is only one x-intercept, for example, if I were to draw this over here, then the x-intercept has to be the vertex. And so that's a clue that when this goes away, when this is 0, that's the center of my graph, which will give me the vertex. So if this goes away, if this is 0, I'm really left with x equals negative b over 2a. And so that is the x value of our vertex. Now these are two formulas that either you can memorize or you can just remember that the x value of the vertex is the negative b over the 2a. And so again, we've gotten another piece of information kind of about these quadratic graphs. So just kind of in summary, I want to remind you of a couple of things. Number one, the axis of symmetry always passes through the vertex. Okay? Number two, the axis of symmetry, or the x value of the vertex, can always be achieved by taking the two x-intercepts and finding the center, by averaging them essentially. And note that if I do that for this one, 0 plus 4 divided by 2, I get 2. So x equals 2, because remember the equation is xv equals that. So that means xv, the x value of the vertex, is 2. All right. It also means that my axis of symmetry is at 2. And I'll show you how we'll use this in the next video. All right. Now, thirdly, note that the negative b over 2a will also give us the x value of the vertex. So we have two different ways to get the x value of the vertex. Now, just kind of as a last point, if you do get the x value of the vertex, we don't have the y value yet. How do we get that? Well, it's just like any other point. You take the x value, whatever that is, and you put it in for x, and then solve for y. And so that part will actually be easy. Now, I hope that that kind of all made sense. If it didn't, maybe rewind the video and look through it again, just so that you can get the basic ideas down. Once you have the basic themes and the basic ideas and the basic understandings down, then go ahead and go on to the next video, which is going to essentially go through an example in which I use these ideas. And I'm going to use all of those, including the quadratic formula. All right, so I hope that's a good start for you. Ciao.